Hey everybody, welcome back to Authentic Conversations. We're thankful that you have joined us today. And if this is your first time listening or watching, we're grateful that you are here joining us. And then for those of you who are returning, welcome back. And thank you for being such just consistent people who allow us to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today we're going to be talking about comparison. And this kind of came from the idea of comparison is the thief of joy. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like a heavy sentence. But would you just kind of take us for a moment and talk about what type of comparison is that? Because I feel like you could say not all comparison.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think there's levels to all this. So kind of walk us through just some of your initial thoughts of comparison and how it steals our joy, and what does that look like?
I think everybody has personal experiences in this kind of a thing because we compare ourselves to other people, and when we do that, oftentimes it's an unfair comparison because there are things. Everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses, we all have uniquenesses. So when we start comparing ourselves to other people, then I think we can get into a vortex that is very unhealthy because there's a lot of different factors at play as to why somebody may be stronger at something than you. But I hadn't thought about that, Kenny. It's it probably doesn't always have to be an entirely negative thing. I mean, I think that there are some times where you want to, in a healthy way, have some things that you're looking at and weighing out. But I think as we're talking about it today, we're talking about that kind of comparison that really does rob you of the joy of who you actually are. I think it also robs you of the joy of who other people actually are.
Yeah.
So comparison can really be an enemy, and it's a pretty subtle enemy. Here's the danger of comparison. Anytime that you're comparing yourself to someone else, then at the end of that, either you see yourself better than or less than someone else. Mm-hmm. And either one of those things is a dangerous place to be because pride can come in if you think that you're better than somebody else. But also there's this very self-deprecating, negative self-image of who you are if you think that someone else is better than you. And of course, we're not talking about, there are people that are going to be better at you at certain things. Yeah. But we're talking about, these kinds of deeper comparisons where we're constantly trying to be like somebody else or, constantly, playing all of that out. And that's the thing that's very negative. I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes I love, it's a deeper issue that we're talking about because there's times in my life, or there's a thing that I look at when I'm comparing myself to you. I think there's a healthy way to do it because okay, I see where you're at in your life. How did you get there? And so I'm trying to compare what are the routines, what are the disciplines, what are the things in my life that I need to instill that aren't there that have gotten you to where you're at in your life. Yes. But then I think you kind of touched on a little bit. What happens is that when we begin to compare ourselves in an unhealthy way, I love that you said you can go one of two ways, and depending on your personality, you're usually going one of those ways.
That's right. That's right.
If you're,
that's right.
Depending on your personality, you're always going to look at people with an eye or with the perspective that they're better than you, or you're always going to look at people. And I know some of these people who they compare themselves to somebody else and they go, I could be doing that so much better. Yeah. Or I could be, so talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned that it robs your perception of the other person. You mentioned, what do you mean by that?
Because I think oftentimes Dr. Seuss has this great line. He says, there's nobody youer than you. So what happens when we compare is that we're trying to put either something of ourselves over onto somebody else or something that belongs to them over on us. Yeah. And we can't be somebody else. Yeah. Nor can they be like us. And so I think a lot of times we end up robbing ourselves of our own identity and being able to find the values, the strengths. Now, I do think we need to be honest with ourselves about areas. You were talking about, for example, making comparisons to me, well, I'm older than you are. We have a very close relationship. There's a mentoring relationship, a friendship. There's a lot of years, 10 years plus into this relationship. So, yeah, there's a way that you can kind of navigate and have benchmarks. But what you cannot do or think in your mind is that ultimately you want to be like me in every way, or follow the exact same path, because you're a different person than I am. And that's where I think that we have to find the value of that. Let other people be who they are.
Yep.
Celebrate their strengths without being jealous of them.
Yep.
Acknowledge, even if it's just personally, that people have weaknesses, and make room for that and give grace for that.
Yeah.
But then also appreciate that about yourself as well. You have self-awareness where you know where you are strong, but you also know where you are weak. It helps us, if we have a healthy understanding of these things, it helps us to lean toward one another rather than just comparing and coming up with, these kinds of insecure responses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think comparison is just something that's built into our human nature, built into who we are? And where do you think that kind of comes from? Like, what's the driving force behind comparison?
I think that you probably touched on it when you said, depending on your own proclivities, depending on your own inward process. I started to say right away, insecurity is what drives comparison. And that's probably true with a lot of people. Maybe pride drives comparison. I know some people who love, when they know they're going to end up on top of the equation, they love to make the comparison, because it makes them, I would still say that actually is insecurity. I mean, pride is just a loud or heightened version of insecurity.
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe I think insecurity is a big part in it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The story that came to mind, because I think sometimes we can maybe look at this conversation and be like, well, is this really biblical? Well, I think of a story when Jesus's disciples were around each other. Even this is even something that Jesus himself had to deal with his own people.
Boys.
And they were trying, hey, who's greater?
Yeah.
Who's greater?
Yeah.
And so, do you think that it's do you think there's I want to say a good motivation behind it, or where do we just get turned around on it? Because I think, like I said, there's some good things that you can walk. Well,
I will tell you this. I think that it's interesting because I hadn't thought about that. Or even the parable where Jesus is talking about the story of the younger
Prodigal
brother, the prodigal son, the younger brother that went away. The older brother is there. And you can tell the older brother is just doing this whole comparison thing the whole time, because that's the awkward and the tangly part of this story. Is the younger brother, he falls on hard times. He comes back with great humility. He's embarrassed by this whole thing. He comes back to his father, and the older brother is like, why are we doing that? He's the one that left. He doesn't deserve to, there's this whole thing. I stayed here the whole time. I was doing all this work.
Definitely older brother.
Older brother syndrome.
Yeah.
I have that. Do you have that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
I forgot your question.
Oh, sorry. I was just talking about I don't even remember now, my own personal, because I went back to a question before.
We were talking about Jesus and how he was to his disciples and all of the comparison that went along with that. How do we get?
Yeah. Where does it start going wrong at? I think that was kind of my question.
Oh, and yes, thank you. So I think selfishness. And the reason why I say that is because whenever you're comparing, there's one common denominator in every comparison, and that is you're comparing yourself with someone else. So whether you end up on the top of that equation or on the bottom of that equation, it's either self-exaltation or self-deprecation. It's still self at the center of it.
Yeah.
And I think because we are so centered on ourselves, and selfishness, someone has described it this way, is it's not that we need to think of ourselves as less than, but it's just we need to think of ourselves less often.
Yeah.
Like we just tend to put ourselves right in the middle of that, and we're so insecure about either we don't think we quite measure up or whatever, and so we make these comparisons, and we have to learn, I think, to find the value in who we are, be honest about weaknesses and all the things, and be able to find that in other people too, and celebrate that, and not become so centered on ourselves.
Yeah.
That's where comparison really, that's where it trips us up.
Yeah. I think I'll speak from my personal level. I think one of the I find that a lot in pastors. This fault of comparison, because especially like, because we have in our denomination, we have a big convention, a connection that happens every year. And everybody, it's kind of like you get to see your friends from California, from the Northwest. So like there's all this, and everybody's, hey, how's it going? How's ministry? And everybody's got a big old smile. I'm doing great, and so nobody's doing it intentionally, but I think if somebody were to ask the question, I think a lot more pastors are, when they hear about other stories, like, hey, how's it going in your church? Oh, it's great. This is what's going on. I think there's some level of like, I kind of wish that was happening here, and then
for sure.
And then it happens. Okay, God, is this what you calling me to do? You
so
hit
true.
like,
well, and you know what, honestly, Kenny, I'm glad you brought that up, because in conversations like this is what can happen. We're sitting at a table, we're talking about a topic. And we don't mean for this to happen. It just kind of, sometimes it ends up being interpreted like, we are experts on this topic, or we figured all this stuff out, and now we're just helping other people figure it out. And the truth is, I do that all the time. And I try never to like ask those kinds of questions that they're just offensive questions. Like, how many people are you running in your church? And how, like those kinds of, for me, I'm so tired of that kind of thing. Not that our denomination really is filled with a lot of that, but whenever you're around in those environments, that's just so easy to slip into that. But still, I will, hear about somebody doing something, and I'll think, man, we don't have that ministry. We really need to do that. What are we even doing?
That's what you get to, right?
Yeah.
Are we even doing anything?
and it's terrible.
That's so
and
true.
And there's been times where I've had conversations with you. I'm like, just frustrated because I'm looking at one little thing. I've done that with other staff members and team members that we have, but it's so easy to do. We fall into this trap. So it's not like, it's just the egotistical people that do this, or the highly insecure people. It's every one of us that has this, when you're a parent and you're around other people's kids, and if the other people's kids are behaving really well, and you're like, oh my gosh, get your finger out of your nose, right?
You just want to knock little Timmy down on the other, trip up the kid playing soccer. I'm trying to get my kid to like, Kenneth, just chase the ball, bro. Just go out, And then there's like the other kid is like running down the field and just going to stick my foot out. Like,
you're that parent.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of like, it's so true. Like we find all these different levels, because I think you brought up just a great point about that, is when we start comparing in unhealthy ways, we start magnifying these things, and we lose sight of everything else.
Yep.
It's just like a magnifying glass. Like when you zoom in on that part and you can't see anything, everything
else. You get blinders. That's right. You know what I thought about too, and this takes this conversation a little bit to a different place. All I knew, we do this sometimes, like we have a subject, but we don't this is where we actually talk about it, is right here in front of the cameras live, right?
Yeah.
So we haven't talked all the way about this, but I thought about this too. It's not only is it a temptation for us to compare ourselves with other people, but I think we also have to talk about the fact that we compare people with other people. And I'll give you some examples. If you worked at a particular business and then now you're in another place, then you tend to make comparisons about what this place was like versus that place, or more specifically, what this boss was like versus that boss. Let me bring it closer to home with what we do. When there is a transition in a pastor, it's huge. It's huge, the level of comparison, because people are so used to the voice of their shepherd, the ways of their shepherd, because there's a rhythm, there's a cadence to a shepherd, how a shepherd will lead his or her flock of people. I'm using imagery there. And when there is a transition, even if that transition is very, very healthy and everybody's kind of, walking with it and understand, there is a new shepherd who has a new voice and a new way of leadership, and his pace is different. Her words are different, whatever that may look like. I've seen that happen so many times. And in fact, the longer I'm thinking about this a lot, because I've been here at New Hope for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And when the time comes for me not to be here anymore, then what does that look like? Not only what does it look like for me and what does it look like for the church presently, but what does that look like moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very difficult for people to receive someone new.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When they keep comparing the new person to the old person, and that which is completely unfair.
Yeah.
Because they're a different person. They have different gifts. They have a different calling, a different assignment, a different season. And we have to be very, very, very aware of that and careful. So, because otherwise you're trying to make people become who they are not. And it's like wearing Saul's armor. You know that story when Saul was trying to send David out to fight the giant, and he said, "Here, wear my armor." David was like, I can't do. If I'm going to do this, I have to do this the way that God equipped me to do it.
Yeah,
I can't do it the way that you would do it.
Yeah.
So we have to let people be who they are.
Yeah.
Right. That's a huge, big deal.
Yeah. Sorry, this is a complete side note, but as you were just bringing up Saul and his armor, I never thought about it this way. It was just like you said, like it was kind of like Saul not willing to fight the giant, but he's like, here, take.
Yeah, you probably should do it this way. Yeah, I don't want to do it. Yeah, but if you do it, you should do it this way.
Oh man, that's a sermon right there.
What a chicken.
I know. So, what are some other joys that comparison robs us of? You mentioned you mentioned a couple here and there, but is there anything else that comes to your mind that?
Well, I think it does rob us of the joy. Okay, I would say two things: the joy of who we actually are. I think we need to find joy. I don't mean like some sort of a weird pride thing in who we are. I'm just saying to really be okay with the fact that God made us a certain way.
Yeah.
And to rejoice in it and to know what our strengths are, to know this is the dance that we dance. This is how we do this. Yeah. And so we bring it and we acknowledge just who we are.
Yeah.
Be okay with your fingerprints. Be okay with how you do things. Mm-hmm. But also, I think that comparison robs us of the joy of who that other person is. And so because you can't get to know who a person actually is if you keep expecting them to be somebody else.
Yep.
So I think if we were just to lean in and ask questions and get to know them, how are they thinking and what would that look like for them, or why did that work for them? I recently had a conversation with a pastor who had watched some of our videos. I have a lot of videos, and these particular videos were things that were relative to our church, and here's who we are, our vision, our mission, our values, how we have things set up or whatever. I spent quite a bit of time, if you'll recall, we did these videos a few years back. A lot of time went into those videos. Years worth of thinking about it, pondering, how can we do this? What does this look like? Because it wasn't really about the video. It was about how can we effectively communicate who we are. There was so much of a process. I couldn't even begin to describe how many years, really led up to actually recording a video that said these things. But for the pastor watching this, and I so appreciated his heart as he was sharing this with me. He was like, I was watching it and I I kept thinking, I just don't want to watch this anymore, because he was getting discouraged because these videos are really polished, and he's like, all this language that you have, and it's very succinct, and it's like you have these statements and all these things, and and then the place where they've only been there for a few years, and part of that is COVID reality, and so they don't have all of those things. But it was so good to sit down and talk, because then he was able to hear from me, oh man, don't think that we have all this stuff together. Because we've worked very hard, but that's years of process that you are hearing articulated, and you're only seeing that one glimpse. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that when we're looking at other people or ourselves. This is one snapshot of a whole lifetime. And so what would that look like if we could really just kind of play that out? And if you really want to get to know somebody else, part of what you have to do is get to know their past and their story and what brought them to this place where they are. And once you understand that, then you can say, oh, that makes sense why they do this, or why they're really good at this. And it frees you up to appreciate someone for who they actually are.
Yeah. I think there's no better example of people learning how to be themselves than watching kids, around other kids. Yeah. Because there's this cohesiveness of their playing together. They don't always get along, whatever, but they play as who they are,
That's
and
right.
I'm coaching Kenneth's soccer team, and so Kenneth, we're doing these drills where we're running back and forth, and I was kind of joking about this already, but I said, all right, guys, we're going to run down the field. And so all the kids are running. And then there's my kid who loves Sonic, and Sonic runs with his hands backwards. So Kenneth is sprinting down the field with his hands backwards. I'm like, dude, swing your arms. Come on, And it's just like this idea, but he's in his mind at that moment, he's Sonic. Man. He's cruising.
Yes, absolutely.
He's not looking.
Yeah.
He's not looking at the other kids and how fast they're going.
Yep.
He's not getting discouraged that, he's finishing second, third, he just knows how he wants to run, and he has a goal that he's getting to.
Yeah.
And he's going to get there exactly how he wants to get there,
That's
good. And I think that is just like a great, like understanding your call.
Yes.
Understanding what God is calling you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of trying to figure out, God will reveal things to you. And it's not that we don't use resources from people. We don't use things that they're doing.
Yeah.
But allow God to speak to you on how he wants to accomplish the goal in your own life.
Yeah.
Because it may be a little bit different than how it is for everybody else.
Yeah, it really is true. And we end up sometimes, especially if we really admire or respect somebody else, when we start comparing ourselves, then what happens is we start chasing after them when we try to be more like them, which can be okay to a certain degree. I think that God does want us to have people in our lives, and our relationship is like this, where there's a mentoring relationship. There are some things about me that you are chasing after. I mean, I don't know the better word to say that, but I mean, just so those can be good and those can be healthy, but not at the expense of who you actually are.
Yeah.
And this is why it's important for someone like me, who is a coach and a mentor and a pastor and a friend to you, to be able to say, and I'm really thankful actually, because you know who you are. That's never been a major challenge for you, I don't think, in that regard. But I have had to have this conversation with others to say, you be you. Be okay with being you. Like, you don't have to do this the exact same way that I did it.
Yeah.
Here's how I do it. Yeah. Here's why I do it the way that I do it. So I think for coaches and mentors, pastors, leaders, I think we need to free people up to be themselves.
Yeah.
Not expect them to just totally be like us in every way. In fact, I don't even want you to be like me in every way. I didn't want that of my kids. My kids are very much like me in certain areas of their life, but they are very, very different and unique in other areas of their life. And I love that because they know who they are. And so we want to, whether it's our own children or other people around us, we want them to know who they are and be okay with it and to be accepted and loved.
Yeah.
Right there at that place of who they actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you bring up a great point, even with kids.
Yeah.
How much do we compare our kids' lives into where we think that they should be? It's not even like where we were when we were their age.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's this, it's just like this idealist, like you should be doing this by now.
Yes.
You should be. Now, don't get me wrong. There's sometimes there's some parents, they swing the complete opposite way, and they've got nothing there, structure or whatever. But I think
when my kids were young, we had them in different sports. You were talking about soccer. We did soccer. We did basketball. We did baseball and softball and volleyball. I like all the things. But when our kids got into swimming, they really found their place. Both of my kids really enjoy swimming. They love swimming, being around the water. My son especially, he really flourished in, we always joke around, and he's like, Dad, I just had to realize I wasn't good at land sports. I'm better in the water. So, and he was really great. One of the things that I loved about swimming was that there was a team. And so you would have these swim meets, and you would, win or lose as a team, but yet it was also very individualized, because you would have each kid, especially the younger ones, they would come out and they would have, hey, this was your personal best. You improved your time from the last time that you swam this. And so it was very encouraging for the individual as well.
Yeah.
So there was this team component plus the individual. And I think that we have to remind ourselves that there is a uniqueness about every individual, but then there's this cohesiveness about us as a team. That's where I think, too, this conversation goes in, is instead of comparing ourselves, because if I were to compare myself to you, and I have done that before, because there are certain things that you're just naturally gifted at, and I just walk away going, I could never. I have no idea. So instead of making that like a divisive thing, like there's a tension there, man, I just want to lean into it, because we're on the same team. Why do we need to fight over the same rebound?
Yeah.
Right? Same team.
Yeah.
So let's stop fighting about that. Let's just use this to our advantage. Let's use your strengths and my strengths, and let's get the win.
Yeah.
So I think if we can see that collectively a little bit better, it would help us in this whole comparison game.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
What are some other kind of, just, if somebody's kind of stuck in a season right now where they feel like they're just comparing themselves to everybody else, like it just feels like they're at the point, they're at a low point in their life, and they see everybody else succeeding around them. They see everybody else, or what they would call success, because sometimes we put the front. We're talking about you getting locked out of your Instagram account today, but
I did. I totally.
You go to social media, you would think everybody in the world is successful and good looking, but you.
Yep.
Yep. But that's just, like you said, it's one glimpse. It's not even a true glimpse at a lot of times. So what's some of the encouragement that you would speak to somebody who is at that point in their lives?
I would actually have a couple of things to say. I would say, first of all, stop looking around you so much. If you're running a race, you cannot spend your time turning and looking at the other runners in the other lanes. It slows you down when you do that. You need to know what race that you're in and what lane that you're in, and run for the prize.
Yeah. And
so the author of Hebrews would say it this way: look unto Jesus. He's the author and the finisher of your faith. So I think that we have to encourage ourselves to stop looking around at everybody else. Yes, we learn from one another. Yes, we have, people that are in our lives in a positive sense. But this whole negative comparison thing, and just, what has God called you to do? What is he asking you to do? What is your assignment? What is your lane? Do that.
Yeah. And
do it really well. And get other people around you that can help you to do it really well. And don't be so insecure. And also, if there are other people that are really good at something and you're not, instead of like getting all angsty about it, lean in toward them. Let them be a part of the solution rather than the problem.
Yeah.
And I would say that as well when it comes to other people. Leaders, I would say, stop wasting time spinning your wheels in the sands of comparison. Instead, move forward with what you're strong in. Find out what those strengths are and run in those lanes. And also allow the other people around you to be who they are as well.
Yeah.
So if we can let loose of those kinds of unhealthy comparisons, man, I just think that we can really get so many things. Maybe the other thing too is get off of social media as much, because there's no way you can't compare in those environments. It's kind of how it's all set up.
Yeah.
So you just have to realize the false narratives. Some of it is because other people are trying to be false in how they display themselves, but some of it is just the narrative of your mind.
Yeah.
And you just need to know when the enemy is playing games with your mind, and there's always that comparison, understand where that actually comes from.
Yeah.
And don't entertain those thoughts.
Yeah. What's the enemy's goal in making you compare yourself to others? And we've talked, we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but what would you say, like, as the enemy is trying to get us to compare ourselves to other people, what's the one thing that he's trying to steal away from us? Besides joy, because, well, you could say joy too, because I think that fits into what we're talking about.
I think that the enemy has, from day one, tried to steal away our identity as people who are created in the image of God. So the enemy in the Garden of Eden caused Adam and Eve to question and wonder, oh, maybe God's holding something back from us. So there was that distancing that happened. There was that little bit of a question. That was that margin and that space that was entered in there. And man, the enemy loves to just hang out in that space. Oh yeah, what if he's holding something back? And I think the enemy does that in all kinds of ways and all kinds of different conversations in our minds. And because I think if he can convince us either that we are less than, or that somehow God has not met up to certain expectations or whatever, then I think that he can come and he can start whispering to us about our identity.
Yeah.
If there is an issue in today's generation, if there's a greater issue than probably almost any issue, it would be the issue of identity. And that plays itself out in sexual identity. It plays itself out in gender identity. It plays itself out in all kinds of ways. But it's not just those categories. It's every aspect of our lives. We don't know who we are. And part of why we don't know who we are is because we are failing to fully appreciate that we were created in the image of God. Yes, there is this sinful nature about us. Yes, we have all these broken parts of us that have to be dealt with spiritually, and let the Holy Spirit bring healing. But at the end of the day, we just need to remember we are loved by God, we are created by God, we are seen and heard by God, and that he has good plans for us. So we don't have to compare ourselves to every single other person. We can rejoice in the fact that God sees us and knows us.
Yeah.
And he wants us to fully be who we are.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, would you do this as we get ready to wrap up? Would you just mind praying for us this afternoon?
Absolutely.
And just helping us live that out.
Yeah. We all need to live that out. Father, I pray that you would help us. Lord, as we are individuals called by God and created by God, Lord, I thank you that you would help us to remember that you truly do see us and hear us and love us. Lord, I pray for the person right now who is battling with those comparisons. They're comparing themselves with other people, comparing themselves sometimes with these images or posts that they see on social media. Lord, I pray that you would deliver them from that. Lord, that they would recognize that they are who you created them to be, and that they would see their gifts and their strengths, and they would be able to rejoice in who they are and how you've created them. And Lord, I thank you that you would help us to lean toward other people instead of pulling back or comparing ourselves against them. So Lord, thank you for my brothers and sisters, that you would help us, each one of us, Lord, when those thoughts of comparison come in, that we are just reminded that we are enough. We are enough because you made us enough. So we thank you for that, Lord. Our value is found in you. We are created in your image, and so we thank you for it. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Cool. Well, I want to say thank you for joining us. I know I didn't say our name at the beginning after I just realized,
tell everybody who's been talking to us.
That's Kenny. This is Dale.
Sure. Let's go with that. While we're comparing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But we want to say thank you so much for tuning in and listening today. We hope that, I hope you're set free from some unhealthy expectations.
Yeah, that's good.
That you've placed on yourself. Because how often do we do that? Is that we set the comparison, we set where we think we should be at.
Yeah.
and it's just not at a right place.
Yeah,
So, so we want to say thank you. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're watching or listening so you get up-to-date information about when our next podcast is coming out. And the best thing you can do for us is if you would just share this with somebody that you think they need to hear this. And so we'd love to be able to help minister the hope of Jesus to them too. So thank you for watching and listening, and we can't wait to see you back on our next conversation. Have a great day. God bless.